Hello there! Today I'll be talking about the plane Dominaria. Dominaria, oh boy, Dominaria. Dominaria was, at least at one point in time, the nexus of the multiverse. It was the place to be. Anything and everything happened on Dominaria. In fact, over 30 sets throughout Magic the Gathering's history took place on the plane, with another set being released as I make this video, and more on the horizon. Dominaria has been subjected to everything. Wars, extraplanar invasions, climate change. It was also the staging grounds of the Mending, an event that reshaped the very fabric of the multiverse. All of this had left the world scarred, and it was only finally beginning to heal. To quote the planeswalker Karn,
"How many times can you rebuild from apocalypse? On Dominaria, we've almost lost count."
I want to give a short history of the plane Dominaria to bring you up to speed for the story of the set Dominaria. But the thing is, a lot of Dominaria's long and complex history isn't hugely relevant to our current story, so I'm going to give more of a broad overview and save any deeper dives for future videos. So, once upon a time, long before the Mending, the dominant civilization on Dominaria was the Thran Empire, a remarkable society noted for their amazing machines and creations of magical artifice. When Glacian, the chief engineer of Halcyon, the Empire's capital, fell terribly ill with an unknown, seemingly incurable disease, a medical genius named Yawgmoth was recalled from his 5-year exile to treat him. The disease, called phthisis, was seemingly caused by radiation from power stones, artifacts used all over the Thran Empire to power their magical devices, but Yawgmoth did indeed manage to find a cure. As more and more people fell ill with phthisis, Yawgmoth was able to wield his influence as the only person who knew how to cure the disease to become arguably the most powerful person in the Empire. But here's the thing, Yawgmoth was not a good guy. Far from it, in fact. During his exile, he had used his medical expertise to conduct a number of horrific experiments, many of which involved infecting populations with awful, virulent diseases, just to study their effects. Well, after Yawgmoth ascended to a position of power in Halcyon, the various nations he had experimented on, understandably upset that their tormentor had seized control of the most powerful nation on Dominaria, banded together with a couple Thran city-states to declare an alliance. This Thran alliance presented the rest of the Empire with an ultimatum. Either Yawgmoth forfeits power and leaves, or they would declare war. While 4 of the Thran city-states voted to oust Yawgmoth, the other 4 opposed, leaving the decision in the hands of the Thran Council. The council was evenly split as well, but the last 2 votes fell to Rebek, Halcyon's chief architect and Glacian's wife, and Yawgmoth himself, both of whom voted for Yawgmoth to stay. Probably a bad move, as immediately after, Yawgmoth overthrew the council, had all council elders and alliance delegates imprisoned, and declared martial law. Shortly after, with the help of the planeswalker Dyfed, Yawgmoth cracked a large power stone in half to create a permanent planar portal to the plane of Phyrexia, an artificial plane of metal and biomechanical life. With the help of Rebek, Yawgmoth began to use Phyrexia as an infirmary to treat those afflicted with phthisis. Yawgmoth did more than treat his patients, however. After fusing with Phyrexia's core, becoming the plane's god, Yawgmoth used a process he called phyresis to mutate his patients into horrific Phyrexians, to fight for him and do his bidding. With the Phyrexians, the soldiers of Halcyon, and powerful instruments of war called stone chargers, Yawgmoth fared quite well in the war the Alliance waged against him, successfully destroying all he opposed. Those stone chargers were especially useful, as they released clouds of destructive death that obliterated entire cities. While Halcyon was protected from these death clouds by an artifact called the Null Sphere, the city was left vulnerable when the engineers working on the sphere rebelled against Yawgmoth and ejected the sphere into orbit. Yawgmoth had no choice but to temporarily flee back to Phyrexia as Halcyon was consumed. In the last moments before the city's destruction, however, Rebek, having seen what a cruel and vicious person Yawgmoth was, sealed the planar portal using the 2 halves of the Power Stone used to create it. Yawgmoth was unable to return to Dominaria. As the years passed, Yawgmoth continued to refine Phyrexia and his Phyrexians. Due to their very nature, Phyrexians cannot naturally hold a Planeswalker Spark, so Yawgmoth was forced to utilize planar portals to invade other parts of the multiverse, with the goal of recreating them in Phyrexia's image. Dominaria, however, remained one of the few planes safe from his grasp. Almost 5 millennia later, two brothers, Urza and Mishra, were excavating the ruins of the Thran Empire. There, they discovered the two Power Stone halves, called the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, and each claimed one for himself. As their excavation wore on, the brothers became increasingly jealous of each other, each wanting to possess both halves of the Power Stone. This came to a head when an argument between them became violent, ultimately killing their mentor. Following this, each brother went their separate way and began building their own armies, beginning what would come to be known as the Brothers' War. This war was long, arduous, and destructive, lasting decades and killing many. What neither brother realized, however, was that their removal of the Power Stones from the ruins reactivated the planar portal between Dominaria and Phyrexia, allowing Yawgmoth to slowly reassert his influence on the plane once again. He sent his lieutenant, the Phyrexian demon Gix, through the portal to scout. Gix amassed his own followers, called the Brotherhood of Gix, and used them to infiltrate both Urza and Mishra's armies. Mishra, however, seemed especially susceptible to Phyrexian influence and Gix's offers of aid and power. Eventually, Mishra underwent a process called completion, in which a lifeform's organic body parts are replaced with Phyrexian artifice, leaving them a shadow of their former selves. Upon discovering the horror that Mishra had become, Urza used an artifact called the Golgothian Silex to create a powerful ruinous blast to destroy him. This Silex blast killed Mishra and ignited Urza's Planeswalker Spark, causing both the Might Stone and the Weak Stone to fuse with Urza, becoming his eyes. The blast had much more wide-reaching consequences, however, as it shook Dominaria to its core, both plunging it into a dark ice age and sealing it off from the rest of the multiverse alongside 11 other planes. This planar bubble was called the Shard of 12 Worlds, and while planeswalkers could travel amongst those 12 planes, the shard prevented travel to and from the rest of the multiverse. Planeswalkers trapped in the shard were pretty unhappy about the whole not being able to planeswalk thing. After a couple millennia had passed, several planeswalkers held a council, called the Summit of the Null Moon, to discuss how they could break the shard. This summit went awry, however, when a few planeswalkers tried to provoke the rest into fighting each other, hoping that at least one planeswalker would end up dying, and they could use the energy that death released to escape the shard. While no planeswalkers ended up dying, and the summit failed to end the shard, it did inspire Freyalise, a half-elven planeswalker, to discover her own method to break the shard. She discovered that a rogue plane called Chandelar released massive waves of energy as it wandered through the blind eternities. As Chandelar passed by, Freyalise harnessed this energy and used it to cast the World spell, which both ended the Ice Age and shattered the Shard of 12 Worlds. This allowed planeswalkers to come and go once again, but it also left Dominaria once more at the mercy of Phyrexia. With the shard broken, Urza, who was still alive, remember, planeswalkers used to be basically immortal, returned to Dominaria after his prolonged absence. In his travels, he had learned more about Phyrexia and the intense imminent threat it posed. To combat this threat, Urza, along with his friend Baron, founded the Tolarian Academy, a vast school of magic and technology located on the island of Tolaria. From all over Dominaria, Urza summoned the most talented artificers, sorcerers, mathematicians, and biologists to study at his prestigious school. He planned to use the technology they developed, along with the information he had gleaned from the Phyrexians, to create a time machine that would allow him to gaze into the past and see the ancient Thran war that led to the Phyrexian banishment. In order to aid this effort, Urza built Karn, the Silver Golem. He chose silver as his material of choice because, for whatever reason, he found that silver was the only material that could pass through temporal energies unscathed. Urza also implanted into Karn a Phyrexian Heartstone, once belonging to his friend, the rogue Phyrexian Zansha, to make him fully sentient and allow him to develop a personality. Theoretically, Karn could enter the rifts created with Urza's temporal disruptor, allowing him to change the past. When two Academy students, Joyra and Teferi, were killed by a Phyrexian sleeper agent, a Phyrexian disguised as an ordinary being, this theory was put to the test. Karn successfully went back in time and saved the students, but unfortunately, the time machine suffered a catastrophic failure, destroying the Academy and leaving Tolaria a shattered temporal landscape. 10 years later, Urza, Baron, and Karn returned to Tolaria to rebuild the Academy. Although originally distraught at the destruction he had caused, Urza found that he could use the temporal distortions to his advantage, using fast time bubbles to speed up research immensely. Additionally, drinking the temporally distorted water accidentally made some students, like Joyra and Teferi, who had been trapped in and subsequently freed from slow time bubbles, become functionally ageless. With the Academy once more operational, Urza did a number of things to prepare for the inevitable full-scale Phyrexian invasion. 1. He created the Bloodline Project, a project of genetic engineering with the goal of making advanced super soldiers. 2. He created the Legacy, a collection of artifacts, including the Might Stone, the Weak Stone, and Karn, that could work in conjunction to defeat Yawgmoth. And 3, he gathered allies from across Dominaria, including the powerful elemental Multani from the Yavimaya forest, the lizard-like Viashino from the mountainous continent Shiv, and the angelic refugees from Serra's realm, an artificial plane that had been attacked by the Phyrexians. This collection of allies would come to be known as the Coalition. One of the main components of the Legacy Project was the Skyship Weatherlight, a vessel capable of flying at supersonic speeds and traveling between planes. The Weatherlight was created with a frame of Thran metal combined with the Weather Seed, a seed from the heart of Yavimaya, given to Urza by Multani. It was powered and given the ability to plane shift by a power stone that Urza created by collapsing Serra's realm. To create the perfect human for his perfect ship, Urza's Bloodline Project culminated in the birth of Gerard Capuchin, an ultimate warrior against the Phyrexians. He was put in command of the Weatherlight as it was captained by Sisay, and manned by a number of important figures such as Karn, Multani, Hannah, Urtai, Tangarth, Miri, Krovax, and Squee. And no, you don't need to remember all those names, don't worry. Eventually, the full Phyrexian invasion began, the first wave of which consisted of Phyrexians streaming in through a large number of planar portals. The second wave occurred when Yawgmoth used the artificial plane of Wrath as a staging ground for his troops by physically overlaying it onto Dominaria. While the Weatherlight, along with the massive army Urza had rallied, defended Dominaria, Urza led a group of 9 planeswalkers, called the 9 Titans, to attack Phyrexia directly, using massive mech suits called Titan engines. Urza's plan was to use massive explosives called Soul Bombs to obliterate Phyrexia, but unfortunately, they would require an obscene number of mortal souls to fuel. Ultimately, one of the Titans, Tevesh Zot, betrayed Urza and killed 2 other Titans. Urza, however, was out there playing 4D chess. He had asked for Tevesh's assistance specifically because he knew that Tevesh would betray him. In Urza's mind, this foul act justified killing Tevesh and using his life essence to power the soul bombs. However, when the time came, Urza found that he couldn't go through with detonating the bombs and destroying a plane of such great potential knowledge. Urza dismantled the Master Soul Bomb and surrendered himself to Yawgmoth. At the same time, Gerard Capuchin was captured and brought before Yawgmoth, who stripped Urza of his planeswalker powers and made the two fight to the death. Gerard bested Urza and decapitated him, before managing to escape Phyrexia with Urza's severed head. That head, by the way, still fully alive and conscious. Turns out, losing his body was a pretty minor inconvenience to Urza, as his life force was contained within the Might Stone and Weak Stone that were his eyes. Enraged by Gerard's escape, Yawgmoth entered Dominaria himself in the form of a massive black cloud that killed and zombified anything it touched. In a final, last-ditch effort to save Dominaria, Urza told the crew of the Weatherlight about the Legacy and the power it held. By removing Urza's eyes and implanting them into Karn, along with the sacrifice of Gerard's life, the Legacy was completed, forming the Legacy weapon. This weapon activated, covering all of Dominaria in a powerful blast of light, eliminating Yawgmoth and his Phyrexians. With that, Urza, Gerard, and Yawgmoth were dead, and Karn, left with Urza's spark and life force imbued within him, ascended to becoming a planeswalker. The Phyrexians were defeated, Dominaria laid in ruins, and billions were dead. But Dominaria's struggles were not yet over. By this point in time, several major temporal rifts had formed throughout Dominaria, each brought on by a different catastrophe. For example, Urza's Silex Blast created the first such rift. The explosion of the Tolarian Academy created another. By the time the invading Phyrexians had been defeated, there were 8 major rifts, which left Dominaria in a highly unstable and potentially destructive state. A planeswalker named Teferi, once a student at the Academy, devised a plan to seal these rifts. He had actually created a major rift himself when he phased his homeland of Zulfir, alongside part of the continent of Shiv, out of existence to protect it during the Phyrexian invasion. Teferi recognized that, left alone, Dominaria would destroy itself, and, as Nexus of the Multiverse, would likely take out every other plane with it in a catastrophic chain reaction. Teferi recruited a number of allies to help seal Dominaria's rifts, and various planeswalkers ended up sacrificing their lives and/or their planeswalker sparks to stop Dominaria from tearing itself and the rest of the multiverse apart. Freyalise and Lord Windgrace, 2 of the 9 Titans, each sacrificed themselves to seal rifts over their homelands. Karn went back in time to seal the rift over Tolaria. Nicol Bolas sealed a rift by using another planeswalker as an unwilling sacrifice. Teferi sacrificed his planeswalker spark to seal the rift over Shiv and return it to its complete and whole form, but notably was left without the power he needed to do the same to Zulfir. When the last rift was sealed, the Great Mending began, causing a ripple effect that changed the metaphysics of the multiverse. The change was twofold. One, which I talked about way back in the first episode of Magic Lore, was that planeswalkers, who were ageless godlike beings, were reduced to mere mortals, while retaining, of course, the ability to travel between planes. 2, which I did not mention at the time, was that all previously existing planar portals and interplanar technology, such as the skyship Weatherlight, ceased to function. Suddenly, it became much harder for any non-planeswalker to travel between planes. But anyway, with Dominaria stabilized, its inhabitants were left to rebuild once again. For once, Dominaria was able to experience generations of relative peace, and new centers of civilization, such as New Benalia and the Academy at Tolaria West, came into being. At last, Dominaria was safe. Well, for a little while, anyway. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and all that good stuff. So, wow, since the last video we hit 5,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much. It's amazing to me that so many of you want to stick around and watch my silly little videos about card game stories. Speaking of those stories though, this video was pretty difficult to piece together. It's a lot of lore to sift through and, determine what's important and what's not when looking at such a long period of Magic's history. I hope I did a satisfactory job. But also the timing of this video is a little awkward, given how the Brothers War set is, coming out soon. It was extremely useful to have access to the artwork that's already been put out, but it's entirely possible that there's going to be some retcons as the story is unveiled. But I really didn't want to delay this video, so if that's the case, oh well. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.